Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of FRR Recap. This week we will cover round 7, where our drivers raced around Monza, otherwise known as Autodromo Nazionale Monza. Last season, this track hosted one of our sprint races. It was a very exciting race, both this season and last. Monza is one of those tracks that you heavily need straight line speed. But in your setup, it's always interesting to see what drivers favour, whether they favour the straight line speed for the very long straights, or whether they favour cornering speed for the chicanes and parabolica to see if they can gain the advantage there. This week, our Tier 1 drivers tackled the Autodromo Nazionale Monza for what was a very thrilling race. It was a completely dry race throughout qualifying and throughout the main race itself. Some of you may know that last season it was a sprint. The sprint was very action-packed last season. This season, the race did not disappoint. Silent Pistol will now take you through the qualifying and race for Tier 1.
Thank you very much, Moser. So, what we saw in that Monza Grand Prix, what we saw in qualifying was that Roger in the AlphaTauri was able to get P1 in qualifying with an astounding lap of a 119.1. Stocky, though, despite being the championship leader, he actually qualified P5. So, outside of the top 3, he had a bit of a hill to climb to try and gain some points up at the top. And in the race, it didn't get better for Stocky as he cut the chicane and had to stop midway through that chicane. And he went straight down the order to P7 or 8. Roger also, from that start, dropped down from P1, went all the way back to P3. So it wasn't necessarily a good start for the Top Gunners. But speaking about Top Gunners, Top Gun was able to spin from P1 and dropped all the way back down into last place. So early on, there was catastrophic racing from each and every fast driver on the order, on the grid. So Calaco and Neutau eventually were the two drivers to battle for P1. Out of everyone on the grid, you wouldn't expect necessarily those two. So Helsi also retired in the Alpine. It wasn't a good day for the Alpines on that day, and that created a safety car. And Raza had a double overtake on the restart of that safety car through Curve Grande. It was an absolutely beautiful double overtake from the man in the Ferrari, but the man inside of the Aston Martin, the Alpine, spun to the back of the grid, and that man was Neutau. Ragnar also DNF'd, causing another safety car. Weeksy had a double overtake on the straight on that safety car restart. Hank has DNF'd in a McLaren, unfortunate for him. And towards the end of the race, on the 25th lap of the 27, Roger gets a penalty when leading the race, therefore granting Weeksy P1. And Weeksy and Cloud Bang, the Williams, versus the Aston Martin, battling out for P1 on the first turn of the last lap. Unfortunately for the Aston Martin, they were able to walk away from that battle victorious. And at the end of the race, Weeksy won, came across the line to take 25 points home for not only Aston Martin, but for himself.
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting race. One thing I will say is I find it funny that you say Ragnar, but it's Ranga.
Oh, I don't know.
That's funny. It's right. The way you pronounce things, I find funny. But yeah, it's brilliant for Weeksy. I mean, those of you that watched, I think it was the Barcelona episode. We had an interview with Weeksy, and it was, he's saying his goal is to achieve more podiums. As I said, you've got the pace for a win. He said, yeah, I've got the pace for him, but I tend to lack the consistency to be solidly up there. So he was aiming for more podiums this season, and it's amazing. More than thrilled for him to get his debut win in FRR. Just absolutely amazing. It must feel absolutely amazing. We'll have to see if we can get him on again in the coming weeks. this week, one of the
That was well.
shut up. This week, one of the drivers we have in for an interview is Nightel, your current Tier 2 championship leader. He leads the top of the tables by 126 points. He's got a 21 point advantage to his nearest rival, Tom Locke, in P2. He's driven an absolutely amazing season so far. I think it's 4 wins out of 7 on the cards, and many podiums mixed within that. I think you've only had 1 or 2 finishes outside of the podium, and I think one of those was a DNF or you missed a race. So
I missed the race enough yet, no.
have you not?
It's me being P4 in each of them.
So it's still top 5. So that's, it's a brilliant start to the season. Yeah. So you won the opening round. You came second in the second at France. P4 at Spain. Spain was a little bit of a mess, to be honest. P4 at Brazil.
Yeah, strategy was for me.
Another win at Japan, and then a P2 at... Oh, I thought you had 3 wins, but it's 2 wins.
Yeah, it's 2.
It's still more wins than some. I think you've still got the most wins out of everybody. And then, P1 at Japan and P2 at Portugal. But that's the main thing when you're going for a title. It's keeping consistent podiums and top 5 finishes. So how have you come into the start of this season and been like, right, I'm aiming for the championship, obviously, as most drivers do as they come into the season. But after you won the first round, but then you're on the high from the first round. You go into the second round and you're like, oh, I didn't win this race. How do you sort of keep yourself going? Well, actually, no, that's fine, because that's still 18 points or 19 points if you get fastest lap.
Well, I still know I'm going to win the title just because I've been the most consistent this season. I'm probably the quickest there. So it's not a doubt in my mind. If I just get second, like, oh no, I'm definitely going to lose this title. I don't really care, to be honest. Cool. I know I should be tier 1, but I'm unable to make the Mondays that they race for a while.
The self-confidence. That's right. That normally the luck of tier 2 drivers, you've just jinxed yourself and you're going to DNF from the next 5 races.
That's fine. It's taken out, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a very good start to the season. We are we've just passed the halfway mark by just completing round 7. Which let's just go over round 7 quickly. Quite not a boring race from you, but apart from the sort of final stages, there didn't seem to be too much going on, like drama-wise. It seemed to be going quite fine for you. Obviously, you got quite unlucky or misjudged whatever was going on the second safety car restart right before the end of the race.
Yeah.
It cost you 2 positions in the pecking order for points for Italy.
That's fine, I'll get them back. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a podium. It's still good. Do you think that could boil over maybe to future races, the sort of little mistakes starting to creep in?
No.
Well, that's it. That nail in
the I'm expecting to wrap up the title in Austria or Kota.
Jesus. Very confident. I mean, you should, as you said, you are sort of that borderline. Well, I say borderline. You should be a tier 1 driver, really, and you were in the past. But I think what happened was you took a little time out because you couldn't make tier 1. And then when you came back, you were sort of up there in tier 2. But now you sort of got used to the game again. You're definitely the very, very, very sharp end of tier 2. And it's been quite difficult for some people to mount.
I can't drive these cars properly still.
Not in tier 1, but in tier 2 you definitely can. I think not that people have struggled to challenge you, because like we said, you've only actually got 2 wins out of 7. But I think your challengers aren't always as consistent. You know, you've got Wekaz, who is a brilliant qualifier. I think he's got the 4 or 5 out of the 7 poles so far this season. He is a brilliant qualifier, but then he tends to lose it in the race. and then you've got Tom, who tends to qualify up there, sort of top 5 is the average for him, or top 3 really, but top 5 at worst. But once again, he's been quite unlucky in the races. He's DNF'd from a few races. I think it was Suzuka. He chose to retire in the end because he just had such bad luck and he wasn't getting on with the car. So I guess it's, like you say, whilst you're trying to rack it up by Austria or Austin, I guess it's races like that really help you where one of your main contenders just isn't getting on with his car and decides to retire.
Yeah.
Josh, Silent, you got any questions? Because all of my questions are along the same sort of line, so it's just basically the same answer.
Yeah. I mean, this is necessarily when you're going into races. You know, if you've got Weckaz behind you, you know that you've got a certain way of trying to keep him back, or is there kind of unpredictability between the two? Because you two, obviously, top 2 in the leaderboard, being the most consistent out of the bunch by quite a few bits, including Tomlock as well.
Mate, I just drive. I don't really try keeping on that much. I'm just known quicker. If I can just outpace him, that's fine. Defending Monza,
West has definitely had you in some places. He's definitely overtaken you a few times. So when you say just drive, I feel like you're just kind of overcrediting yourself just a bit, because Weckaz is an extremely talented driver on track, and I feel like you're kind of shadowing the fact that you don't need to defend against him, whilst you should be able to, because he's an extremely fast driver.
Yeah, I know he's fast, but I'm faster.
Josh, have you got any questions?
Yeah, I'll move away from the Drivers' Championship for a second and talk about the Constructors. Do you think you can win the Constructors this season on your own? I mean, I know Fixable Rhymes your teammate.
That'd be a tough one to do, but I'm not sure about that one.
Because I don't think you can, with the Alfa Romeos looking so dominant, I think all seasons, in fact, champion constructors, leaders, etc. I think it'd be hard if you could do it on your own. So do you need Fixable to kind of come in and get more points to try and get that?
As long as he just attends the next races and gets some points, and I'll outscore Alfa Romeo for him. I've been doing decent while he's been gone. Every race he's missed, I've got a podium.
I mean, it has been quite unfortunate. He was ill for Portugal, and I think he's still slightly under the weather come Monza. You're currently 38 points behind Alfa Romeo, but at the same time, like I say, with Tom retiring from a few races or deciding to give up whatever DNF, that means that it's then just you and Weckaz to fight alone for points. And I think you're going to claw them back there because, like you said, you are that little bit faster than Weckaz. So 9 times out of 10, you're more likely to beat him on track. I think you'll start to claw those points back if Tom has more and more of these races where he DNFs or he retires, whatever, where he decides to give up. I think it's a possibility that you could, but I think it is going to be difficult even with if Fixable comes back because he's going to be a little bit out of tune with the game.
Yeah, I mean, quite fun last few races, I think, for this season. Yeah.
Can I add something real quick?
Yep.
Nightout, you seem fairly confident on your pace around any
I know what I'm doing.
track. Do you worry that your confidence may be a little bit over the top, and that coming into races maybe you're
because I know my pace. Because I know my pace, and I'd be scared to race against myself because I'll probably crash into myself and die. So yeah, I know what my pace is. I know what I can do. So my confidence this season is quite good, I think. I'm not worried. That's all it is.
I haven't got any more questions. Does anybody else have any more questions?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on then, mate. Like I say, we'll try and get you back on towards the end of the season when sort of things either, well, who knows, they might tighten up, or it might be your champion with 3 rounds to go, and then we'll be interviewing the current Tier 2 champion. Our Tier 2 drivers also tackled the Monza circuit this week. However, the race was slightly different. Qualifying was dry, the same as Tier 1, but at the start of the race, for the first half of the race / 2/3 of the race, was intermediate conditions, and then as it dried up, so of course that provides some excellent racing in terms of the strategy, mixing a few safety cars, and it's fun to watch. It's very entertaining. You've got Josh here. He's going to take you over the Tier 2 qualifying and race for round 7 of the FRR Season 2 Championship.
It was a wet qualifying, actually, for Tier 2 at Monza, with Weckaz and Tom Lock, the Alfa Romeo pairing, locking out the front row. It was a shock 6th place for Nightel.
It was not wet qualifying, mate. It was a wet race.
It was a oh, fuck's sake.
It was bone dry qualifying. Bone dry qualifying. Weckaz got pole again. He's had pole a few times this season, but the weather conditions were sure to change for the start of the race.
Yes. Well, looking into the race then, Nightel had a big mountain to climb, starting from P6. He was the championship leader going into this race, and he did come out victorious in the end after 3 safety cars had occurred during that race, with 6 DNFs. It was a wet race, which made conditions a lot more difficult. Now, there was a great 3-way fight for the lead between Weckaz, Nightel and Tom, 2 Alfa Romeos, yet again appearing the dominant duo, which went into this race with 139 points in the Constructors' Championship and would have come out with a lot more. So Nightel making his way back up the grid in very difficult conditions. And it must be said, JJ Johnson did incredibly well with what looks to be not only his first finish of the season, but his first podium of the season as well, having DNF'd last time out in Portugal. In terms of the Ferraris, who did very well last race, securing what I believe was a double podium, if memory serves me correctly. Didn't go so well for them in the race, with Ranga DNFing early on, and Brewmaster managing to pick up 6th place, just 1 place ahead of Jailblazer. In terms of McLaren's, yet again, only Harry was the only McLaren driver out on the track. So Tier 2, an interesting one, a mixed bag. Well done tonight, winning. JJ Johnson, incredible for the first podium, and Weckaz in that title race. He'll want to do better next time, with Tom Lock definitely wanting to improve on that one.
Somebody clearly hasn't read the stewards report. So if there was ever a week to read the stewards report, this week would be it. So Tier 1, not much changed. A few trivial penalties for sort of small collisions or resetting to track, stuff like that. Nothing major. Didn't shake up the finishing order at all. Tier 2, however, because we had a safety car around lap 12 to lap 15, and then we had a safety car lap 23 to lap 25. That obviously shook everything up because you had just a 2-lap dash to the end. So when it came to penalties that were accumulated across the race, so you had Weckaz had a 5-second for a reset to track. Nightel had a 5-sec for causing a collision. Who else? Somebody else had a 5-sec as well.
Big single as well with a 5-second.
No, he got No, he didn't get a 5 sec because he DNF'd. But Wekaz and Night Owl both got a 5 second time penalty. So Night Owl got demoted from P1 to P3 because of that. You may think, well, why P3? Surely it'd be P2 because Tom Lock also was 5 seconds further back. But he got, due to Big Single sending it a bit on the brakes, a bit down the inside, he got what seems to have been a glitched additional 5 second penalty for corner cutting. So Tom had that penalty removed, which promoted him up to P1. Jay Johnson in P2, Night Owl in P3. Wekaz went from, I believe, what was originally P3 to he got demoted to P5 in the end. He got demoted to P5 because of that 5 sec. He had a 4 second gap across the line to Harry, so that 5 sec put him 1 second behind him. So the final finish order in terms of points was Tom Lock come back to win after what was a very frustrating race from in the cockpit with the 10-second penalty and the crashes and the incidents and all the safety car restarts and the wet to dry conditions. Tom doesn't really like the rain very much, especially not around a track like Monza. So amazing. He comes home to get another win this season. You then had Jay Johnson, as Josh said, after the last week of DNFing from Portugal, a brilliant comeback to finish his first race in FRR and get his debut podium on just his second outing for us. You had Night Owl, once again keeping them consistent points. It wasn't a win, but it was still a podium, coming home in P3. Harry, in the end, because of penalties, just missing out on a podium by, I think, about 2 seconds. Missing out on podium, he comes home P4. That's good points for McLaren, especially considering it was just him that participated this week. Wekaz, P5, that's a big hit, a 2-place hit. That's a lot of points lost that he should have had. Brewmaster in P6, again, it's some points for Ferrari. Ranga DNF'd, so it's good to get those few points whilst you can. And the last point scorers was myself, JL Moser. Everybody else after that retired. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't retire. I normally retire at Monza. I did crash out in qualifying, though, which I'm sure you two blokes absolutely loved. Out of Ascari, I hit the wall on the right at the very end of Ascari, and my rear right fell off. So I'm sure if you saw that, you'd have a field day with that. But apart from that, everybody else was out. I mean, there was one big major incident that caused all these time penalties and the penalties to be removed, so it caused the big shuffle up of the order come the stewards report. But yeah, amazing from Tom. Night Owl still has the championship lead, though. Night Owl is currently on 126 points to, I believe, Tom's... Night Owl's on 126 to Tom's 105. So Tom is 19 points behind. Is it 19? No. 21 points behind Night Owl. And Wekaz is a further 11 behind Tom. So the Alfa Romeo pair in 2 and 3 in the standings is going well, but Night Owl still has that lead with 126 points. But it's round 7, everybody. We're literally only just past the halfway mark of the season. Still a lot can happen. If more races like Monza happen and Night Owl keeps losing points for small things, it could become very tight. Tom has definitely got the pace for a championship bid, so has Wekaz, but Tom is definitely going to want to redeem himself from last season, having to miss so many races as he did. He wants to prove that he's got the pace to be Tier 2 champion, which he does. Well, that marks the end of another episode of FRR Recap. I'd like to thank everybody that participated and everybody that helped behind the scenes to get this episode out to you. We reverted back to a different format again for this week, back to what we have done the majority of our episodes in, with a Tier 1 recap, an interview, and a Tier 2 recap. For the remaining 6 episodes, because we will have a recap of the overall season as a whole. in between season 2 and season 3, we will be testing out more and more different ways of laying out the recap. We will also be testing different ways of recording and different ways for giving you visual aids in the form of clips, in the forms of pictures, in the forms of animations. So stick with us, but the next few episodes will or should hopefully be very different from each other whilst we test different things. Thank you all for listening, and make sure you come back next week for the recap episode for Hungary, where our drivers race around the Hungaro Ring.